How does language program the subconscious mind and the quantum field? How would you like to recognize the energetic frequencies coded into language? And how would you like to safeguard yourself from and disempowering deleterious language? Double repeat there. Hey, buddy, welcome to Education Options TV with me, David James Rodriguez. So we are empowering parents with respectful models of learning. And I have a very exciting show for you today because we're providing solutions with language. And we have some professionals on the show today, and they're offering this course very soon, this week, in fact. So I wanted to get them on the show because this is the time to prepare for the fall course schedule, as many of you parents are out there. And this is going to be helpful for homeschoolers, high schoolers, college students, adults, anybody who wants to learn about the quantum language world and what the heck does that mean. So that's why they're on the show, because I want them to explain to it what this program is in detail. And I mentioned some of the benefits up front. But the main thing is to learn about it and hear their story, because this is what time it is. The great self-ownership awakening is upon us, and language is going to be one of the key tools to get us there. So let me just read their bios here so you know who we are speaking with, both authors and producers here. This is Dani Katz, a visionary thinker with an uber expanded perspective. She has devoted her career to empowering leaders, disruptors, and rebel badasses with the tools, skills, and confidence necessary to thrive as conscious, sovereign, reality creators. Her broad spectrum of practical experience and formal studies, including a master's degree in journalism, combined with a pronounced passion for the metaphysical, inspired her ever-deepening fascination with the energetic frequencies of words, devoted to understanding how language programs the subconscious mind and creates the world as we know it. Dani's impassioned investigations led her to develop quantum languaging, a method of deconstructing and perfecting the myriad ways whys, hows, words shape our every human experience. She's the author of the critically acclaimed best-selling books Word Up, Little Languaging Hacks for Big Change, Pop Propaganda, an illustrated guide, and the language of betterarchy, a blueprint for uniting against tyranny, a lifelong learner with unquenchable thirst for the capital T truth. Dani pushes every possible edge to its outermost limit, both to transform and awaken her consciousness, as well as to pave new pathways for the brave, bold, badasses she guides, teaches, and advises. Dani walks her talk and leads by example, modeling the highs and lows of the transformational path with humor, heart, and authenticity, utilizing her decades of devotion to her own healing, holing, and awakening to support her coaching, consulting clients. Dani works as a quantum languaging consultant and educator, supporting the high-performing needle movers in game-changing organizations in optimizing their communications in service to greater impact, efficacy, and profit, while guiding the individuals to empower themselves, actualize their potential, and evolve the world for the infinitely more wonderful. Amazing bio there, Dani. She'll be on the show here in a few seconds. And John Coleman, his focus is on history, literature, Latin, and legal. He is a proud product of public education. John received his undergraduate degree in history from Western Connecticut State University. Alas, that was to be the end of his flattering academic titles. Unwilling to once again become a debt slave to the usurers, his graduate studies were scotched at the halfway point. John wasted over a half a decade of his professional life attempting to establish a high school for a community who took neither themselves nor their worldview seriously. Burned by these unseemly experiences, on Holy Saturday of 2013, ApocatastasisInstitute was founded. We'll get the correct pronunciation here in a second. The Institute primarily exists to protect the humanities in saying and to provide a haven for academics in a disintegrating professional field. The author of Hurt in 2015, The Trotsky Train in 2018, An Excess of Love in 2024, and Pearls Before Swine in 2024 as well. John daily continues his work of restoring formal classroom learning in a light of the proper personal, social, and political ends of a school. In 2025, John won the Excellence in Education Award from the Education 2.0 Conference Organization. So that is the bios of our guests today. amazing biography from both. You can tell they're very passionate about education, empowerment, and most importantly, you, the listener and viewer here on the show, as we are trying to that make the four can speak about that. So before we get into your course, welcome Dani and John to Education Options TV.
Hi, David. Thank you so much for having us.
Yes, thank you very much, David. I appreciate your rundown there, both of Dani and myself. It was very generous of you.
Yes, absolutely. We want the audience to know what's going on. The world is changing for the better, and also for the systems are going down. You know, that's what I seem to believe. After 100 years of coercion and force and intimidation, it's just not going to work anymore. You know, we're learning through these decentralized technologies and platforms that truth is important, respect is important, empowerment is paramount, and you guys have an amazing course going on. So this course is launching the end of the week, which is I think April 4th. So we have a few days for yeah, April 3rd. Okay, great. So let's get into what is the course and why did you start it? And we'll start with the lady first.
Thank you so much. The course is Quantum Languaging 101, How Our Words Create Reality. And it's really a course about the power of language, understanding language not just as a communication tool, but also as reality creation technology. Understanding the vibrational frequencies coded into language and how those frequencies are programming our physical body, our emotional body, our psyche, our culture, and our world at large, and then how to responsibly use language to consciously uplift ourselves and transform our world for the better.
Very cool. John, would you agree with that, or what do you want to add to that?
Well, I certainly agree with that for certain, and I almost have an itch to drop in for Dani's classes over the weeks ahead. But in any case, yeah, I think ironically, we have all these little gizmos and gadgets to communicate, and yet we don't think about it often. And I think Dani's course will be a great invitation to do that on a much deeper level. I mean, I don't think we really think much about communication, even on a superficial level, though we do it so often. But this is a real opportunity to dive deeper. And I love the adjective there, quantum. This is a very promising study.
Very cool. Okay, good. So I thought, so you have the Institute. And could you pronounce the Institute correctly for the audience, please?
I sure will. And the word for the school is from the Greek language. It's apokatastasis. I'll say that two more times. Apokatastasis, apokatastasis. And we'll spend the rest of the show flubbing it, and that's going to be perfectly all right. The word is Greek, as I say, and it means restoration. And so I just use it in that general sense, restoration of formal education.
Got it. Okay, so you have the Institute, and Dani's going to be the primary educator through it.
Yes, for this coming course, that's right. So Dani will be doing the yeoman's work of teaching there. I'll make a quick intro from now and then, and anyone who enrolls in Dani's course over. Remind me, Dani, how many weeks is the course?
12 weeks.
12 weeks. Anyone who enrolls in that is also gets free access to all of the other open events on my end of things. But yeah, anyhow, Dani is the workhorse teacher there.
Very cool. Yeah, let me ask Dani this, and then we can talk about your institute. It's very cool. So 12 weeks is very powerful. And what would you maybe for some of the people who don't understand the power of language? You know, I'm a fan of Bob Stevens, and maybe you are too. Some of these people out there who have laid the groundwork to help us become more enlightened and aware of how these words shape our reality. Can you maybe give an example for some of the people who don't understand how significant language is in shaping our world so they can see it in maybe some type of real world example that they might not be aware of right now?
Absolutely. Thank you for the invitation. And just to offer respect to Robert Tennyson Stevens, he was one of my teachers and had a profound effect on me as well as on our culture. I'm honored to be doing the same work that he did. So, one of the simplest examples that I can share, take the task of going to work. So, I can say, I have to go to work, I get to go to work, I am going to work. So each of those three versions communicates the exact same idea, and each of those three versions is going to program ourselves and our corresponding engagements with reality differently. So when I say I have to go to work, I'm alleging that I have no agency, that going to work is a burden, that I'm a victim to having to go to work. And when I program the task of going to work with those frequencies, I will necessarily attract more roadblocks, more difficult clients, more conflict throughout my day, because that's how I'm setting the frequency by saying I have to go to work. I'm also setting myself up to be a victim, right? And we live in a realm of frequency. This is what Einstein and Tesla both told us. So when I'm meeting the task of going to work with victimhood, with a begrudging attitude, then that's precisely what reality is going to give me back. When I say I am going to work, totally neutral, right? There's no positive, there's no negative. I'm simply going to work. When I say I get to go to work, I'm programming myself with excitement, with the privilege of having a job and getting to be of service. In my case, to students, to the wonderful people I have on my podcast, what have you. So I call that, within the quantum languaging paradigm, the linguistic gunas, where every word is coded with the frequencies of expansion, contraction, or neutrality. So it's a really helpful framework when we just start to recognize what are contractive languaging habits, what words and phrases are expansive. How can I communicate something that might be bumming me out in a way that's neutral, so that I'm not exacerbating the experience by tacking on a lot of negative frequencies? Did that make sense?
Totally. Yes. This is, after 12 years of forced schooling, we don't want to work, right? We want to play because they just squeeze it out of us. But as an adult, personal responsibility is the name of the game. So when you say I get to, or in my little world, I say I choose to, and I just feel so empowered. I'm just like, wow, even it's just the word. Yes, you got to go dig a ditch, or you got to go do some presentation. You got to do something that's hard and challenging, and maybe you'd rather sleep in all day. But when you say I get to, you tap into this quantum field that you're speaking of, and I can't wait to hear some more examples for the audience in the short conversation we have today. We're not going to be able to cover it, so I invite you to really consider her 12-week course and become a wizard, or whatever the highest accolade at the end. It's going to be very powerful. John, can you tell me about the Institute? That's so cool that you're helping promote this course with Dani. I'd love to learn more about some of the things that you are doing there at the Institute, or is it mainly a language institute, or education in general?
Oh, sure. Thank you for the invitation. So just to reiterate, the word apokatastasis means restoration. And for the longest time in my early career, even when I was still an undergrad, I was involved, as alluded to in my biography there, with a group of alternative people, or alternative education people. And for all their good qualities, those 11 years at that place, one of the things I noticed was a disconnect between their appraisal of education, which I think we would all share as certain aspects of what I call Rockefeller education or industrial education, whatever. And what I saw as a breakdown in social apprehension, meaning that this particular community had a very political and social consciousness, and they had that same as applied to themselves with education. But where I consistently saw a problem was making the connection between the problems they and I were always complaining about and education. And there's a lot there, and I won't hijack the show on that point, except to allude to a massive amount of discussion to be had there. Any case, I realized at a certain point that I, with this community, which in many respects was the best case scenario. Like I wasn't going to come across anything like that. We had kind of outgrown each other, we'll say, after 11 years. And I realized I was not going to have a better scenario elsewhere, and I didn't like that scenario to begin with. So either I had to leave the education field or make a school. And so I chose the second option, and that's consumed the last 11 years of my life. Interestingly, the first stretch was 11 years, and we're up on 11 now this spring. But to the institution, anyhow, no, I mean, the purpose here is to replace, in our own little way, in our own little battlefront, the mainstream education. It's a husk, it's a zombie. It carries on, I think, largely because in these United States, and I suppose we're mostly speaking to Americans here, formal education is basically the only ritual that we all share, for good or bad. So I think there's a certain sentimentality that gives it its heft. But the system is dead. I have books on my shelf here that Apocatastasis Press has reprinted, in fact, like The Murder Machine, which your audience here at the Education Option TV should all read. Patrick Pierce's Murder Machine. Get online for free. That's published before the First World War, and he's saying the exact same stuff we're all saying. Anyway, this is a dead husk, and long story short, what we have done at the Institute these 11 years is, I hope, please God, to have preserved what is good in formal education, in that structure, which a lot of people do well in, I think, whilst also removing, as best we can, with all our own failures and everything, removing a lot of the detritus and a lot of the garbage that attends formal instruction. And so I hope, to put a bow on it, to have taken, and with the other staff members, to have taken the best of formal, structured, organized learning and the best of the insights of the alternative world, and to have something of a common ground there that we've built.
Nice, great. I wrote that book. I never heard about that one. Some of the audience knows that I published a book by John Taylor Gatto about the history of the school system. So yes, we've had long, conversations and presentations about this. And yeah, it seems like there's a new awakening happening. I love that we get to use language to, well, I should say, it says, I think the title of the program is Quantum Languaging. And let me make sure I get it right here. How words create our world. So Dani, let me ask you, how do words create our world?
Well, there's that biblical saying, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. And I know, David, you have a much deeper history in religion than I do. John, I don't know about your history with religion. But that phrase really struck me to my core. The Word was God. Yeah. And so the subconscious mind is responsible for 95% of our experience of reality. And the subconscious mind is primarily programmed through language and repetition. And so the words that we speak, the words that we read, the words that are coming through our screens, the words that we think as we're looping throughout the day, all of those are programming the subconscious mind, are programming our meaning-making filters, right? How it is we make meaning of otherwise neutral reality is going to come through the words that we are hearing all day, every day. So it's just so crucial. If we think of, an invention, think of the stove, right? Whoever invented the stove, all the components for that were coming through words. Well, first I'll need, I don't know any of the components of a stove, but we're thinking in words. We're making meaning of reality through words, and the words that we scribe have a direct bearing on the quality of what is being created. It's not by accident that what's coming through what passes for news these days is a lot of fear, is a lot of division, is a lot of worst case scenarios. They're taking advantage of the minds that are focusing their attention on them and co-opting them with these worst case scenarios, which makes it all the more likely that those worst case scenarios will manifest. So when we start to understand how language is functioning as programming technology, programming you and me and all of us, as well as programming reality at large, then we're resourced and empowered to use language to create the reality that we want to be living in, instead of buying into the fiction that we have no agency over our reality, that we're just disempowered plebes who have to take whatever it is that the predator class has decided to give us. That is completely fallacious on every possible level. So for me, it's about resourcing everyone with eyes and ears to hear, to start to understand how powerful our words are, and start to use our words very consciously and very deliberately to unify and to steer our Earthship onto saner, more wonderful trajectory.
Yeah, well put. I did have some religious background, and it says somewhere in there, I think towards the end, it says whoever changes these words, will be cursed. And so the not good people have been changing these words to make people afraid and disempowered, and actually give away their power willingly, rather than take it consciously and intentionally, and actually kind of slow down and be like, what am I creating with my life? Some of the people who have read the Declaration of Independence know that the right to our life comes from the Creator or nature, whatever it is, whatever you believe in. But surely life is the gift. And for young people not to know about this and not even be aware of this, I think is one of the great travesties, where it's like, well, I remember being a young kid, looking up at the teachers and just have so much hope and so much excitement of life. And you ask them questions and then they don't have any answers. And you're like, well, maybe they've lost their vigor of life, and they demonstrate that by the language that they say, And so, I think there was a study at UCLA, and they said communication is, 55% like body language, And so we have the words as the programming, as Stevenson's would say, Robert Tennyson Stevens would say, but the words are like a software. We have our body is like the hardware, but the language is like a software. And I'm so, grateful that you're carrying this language on, because I think this is probably going to be one of the huge breakthroughs for humanity, is realizing our words, as you quoted the Bible. And even for people who don't like the Bible, there's the phrase abracadabra. And I thought that was a musician's, then you start, well, what does that mean? Abracadabra means speak and it happens. So we start to get into this realm of how powerful that you are, listener, and we are as producers, and the children, once they learn that I'm this very man or woman or child, and I can create things first in concept. And as Einstein said, imagination is more important than knowledge. So first we have to imagine it from the ethers, from the quantum, and then put it into language. And now we can start building a stove, or now we can start building intentional neighborhoods, or independent food, water, energy, the things that this world needs. Starts with the mind and then with language. So this 12-week program is very exciting. And I'm curious, out of 12 weeks, I'm sure you have, some modules that you've, created. Is it like a part 1, part 2, 3? You don't have to go through necessarily all 12 of them, but just so the audience knows what they're getting into, because it's my guess it's going to be equal to like a college level course where you're like involved, you get to interact with Dani, and maybe there's some group stations, and you're going to come out a quantum language champion. It's just my perspective, or maybe it's you can move on to the next level. But what do the modules look like for the audience, so they can kind of get excited? Because I know you and read your books and stuff, and I'm already excited. What are the modules that the audience can look forward to?
Thank you so much for asking, David. So I have them pulled up right here. Excuse me for looking away at my other screen. So the first one is about words and vibration, and that really goes deep into quantum physics and understanding how the nature of this realm is frequency, is vibration, understanding the multidimensional nature of reality. And then from there, we move into the subconscious mind and the quantum field, and how those work in tandem as a feedback loop. We go into social programs, propaganda, the weaponization of the word authority. Module 4 is identity. We get into victimhood, wrong use of will in Module 5. Module 6 is temporal languaging, understanding time as not a linear conveyor belt that leads us from birth to death, but understanding time as simultaneous, omnidirectional, and now, and how to adjust our language accordingly. We get into lack and limitation. We get into conflict, violence, polarities. We get into what I call negative space speak, speaking, negatively, gossiping, complaining, how these things are manifesting and having a direct effect on the world that we see. Module 11 is interpersonal communication, and just, some tips and habits for optimizing how we're speaking, in one-on-one communications. And I'm still building them out. So there'll be aspects around understanding masculine, feminine communication, having nothing to do with men and women, but understanding the frequencies of words that are coded with kind of open-ended totality versus more direct limitation, and starting to recognize when we're speaking in a sort of imbalanced way.
Awesome. Well, I have wrote down some of those modules, Dani. Very beautiful. I'm going to touch back with them in a second here. John, I want to ask you about your institute. So is it a virtual institute, or is there a physical space as well? And what other types of courses do you offer there?
Great, thank you for that, David. So we take distance learners through the internet, and also in person if you happen to be here roundabouts Danbury. I'm in New Milford, which is just a bit north of Danbury there in the west of Connecticut. So yeah, I mean, preferably if one can make it here to meet in person, it's just a much better thing. Speaking of communication, there's just not, this is good, and it's in a certain sense a miracle that we're able to speak across a continent without raising our voices. But
Nice,
at the same time, to be in person is a special thing, and has a different dimension, I've certainly found, with students. So we take both, to your question there. And there's a wide array of courses that we have in this past year. In addition to Dani and her talents, there are others who have joined us. So it's good to have a larger staff than we've had. We've had other people on staff in the years gone by, but it's stabilizing in the past couple of months there in terms of a larger teaching body there. And our bread and butter, and it's something I spend a lot of time working on when I'm out of the classroom myself, is our 3-year or 2-year, depending on the preference, preferably 3-year course of study in the humanities, where in 3 years we cover everything in terms of history, literature, philosophy, and quite a language study in terms of other languages, Latin and Greek, for instance, over 3 years in a synchronized way. That is to say, for instance, if we were studying the Reformation, we would be reading the King James Bible because the Bibles come up, so I'd bring that up. Or we'd be reading Shakespeare at the same time, we'd be reading about Francis Bacon's philosophy at the same time. Because to your audience here on Education Options TV, that's one of the biggest problems of modern education. In any modality, including a lot of alternative modalities, one of the unspoken lessons, much deeper than whatever silly books might be taught or whatever agendas of the week might be in there, one of the deepest problems of Rockefeller education is shattering the mind in terms of, hey, Johnny, let's learn math for 45 minutes, and let's do gym now, and let's do history, and let's do basketball. And after how many years? 12 years of this, 16 years, you go to college, 16 years, your ability to look at life in a symphonic way, in a unified way, in a lowercase c Catholic way, a unified way, is shot. It is absolutely shot, and that's not for nothing. That's not for nothing, and I think it directly touches on why Dani's teaching her course and where she's coming from in her own approach. Is when we're wrung out of this system, we are atomized, we cannot even think in a unified whole, and so we can't act in a unified whole. So anyway, to your initial question, we please God offer, try to bring this together in our study, try to mend whatever damage may have come from previous study in the regards of trying to see a unified whole in study. And then finally, in terms of pedagogy, the other thing I think we really do excel in, and may, if not be unique, certainly be unusual in, is this idea of relational education, which was known through many cultures before the modern period. This idea of having long-term, stable academic relationships with the teacher, more than just for a semester or for a class or for 45 minutes or for a year. I think we've all had the unpleasant experience of being attached to a teacher and then, randomly being with another teacher is probably just as much of a mensch, and that's great, but the relationship bond is broken. And so just like we try to knit together the different sciences of life, likewise, we try to knit together our classes in terms of the learners and the teachers over, if they're interested, over years. And I think that does produce a much more stable and much more holistic mind in terms of how it approaches knowledge.
Beautiful. Yes. As you said, the Rockefeller system, I call it the government monopoly compulsory system. It shatters the mind, and it doesn't connect the dots. And as I mentioned before, life is the main thing in my view. And so all these things relate to life: the literature, the religion, the philosophy, even physical, or the physics, and all these things. It's like as Joseph Campbell taught me. He says, the great mystery is you. It's where you're sitting right now. I said, what? So, the fact that we're breathing and alive and have consciousness, what a gift. And it's never touched in my 12 years of schooling and 5 years of college. It's like the great gift of breathing and life, and to be here and have consciousness, and to be, and to think about these things and to create these things, and all the great mystery. So I just love the questions that get to come up, and to be with other conscious beings like you two and our audience here, to begin to ask the big questions and to not let these quote authorities tell us what to do. So that's one module I want to touch back to, Dani, because I'm a great fan of destroying that. So I don't want you to give the module, but maybe you can give just a short little course, a description for that particular course about how authority is totally illegitimate, or at least not based on coercion. It's not valid.
Sure, I'm happy you asked. It's one of my favorite modules. So, a large part of what informs my teaching and really everything I do is root causes and solutions. So I see the current weaponization of the word authority, how the definition has been hijacked, and how that's been internalized and normalized by humanity as one of the primary root causes of the issue that we as Americans are facing today. So when we look up the word authority on Google or modern day Merriam-Webster, they will define it as some external entity that can tell us what to do. But if we take it back to the Latin, it actually comes from auctor, AUCTOR, which means builder or founder, or one who causes something to grow. So that is very, 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 very different. But if we really break it down, authority has the word author in it. What does an author do? Write stories. So very simply, authority is our God-given right to write our stories however we choose. So what I teach in that module is that authority is not an external agency. It's something internal that we cultivate by knowing ourselves, by developing our character, by acting in integrity, and starting to recognize language that's coded with the fallacy of external authority, and correcting that by using language that is coded with internal authority, and also being sure that we claim our authority and that we're acting in integrity with our authority, with our language, and then of course our actions.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's a great book out there that talks about the greatest superstition, and it's this idea of authority. And to your point about being an author, that's one of Gatto's great quote. He says, you're either the author of your own life, or you're an unwitting actor in the story of someone else, paraphrased. But it's like Really? So helping young people, and I guess you're targeting, as we said, homeschoolers, teenagers, college, adults in general. Danny, how young can humans begin to tap into quantum language? Is it just for like the middle age and young adult, not middle age, or is it for even for the I don't know the infants or elementary school age? How young can children tap into this new skill?
I would say from birth onward. I mean, our course is recommended for high schoolers and above. And children learn from modeling. They're absorbing everything that we're doing. So I would say from infancy onward, when we are incorporating these principles in how we're speaking to our children, they're going to be absorbing that. They're going to be absorbing a certain degree of mindfulness, consciousness, awareness around language, speaking positively about ourselves, speaking about the positive change that we're creating, not the negative stuff that we wish wasn't happening. We'll be speaking with agency. So I think it's crucial for parents to be learning this. I don't think there's any age that's too young for children to start to learn how our world is created with words and how words are programming everything.
I agree. Yeah, I agree. I think even from the womb, this can begin to happen because, the great quote, which is, I'm not anti-war, but if you have a pro-peace rally, I'll be the first one there. Some of the people who are maybe less aware don't realize the significance of the difference of those phrases. Those are vastly different phrases that we're speaking into the universe. And I think, again, this consciousness is rising. One other question about the modules, you mentioned identity, and this is something I'm also learning about deeply, about, again, what are we doing here? Who are we? And this is such a great topic. Can you tap into maybe some of the key things they might draw from that module?
Absolutely. So our current iteration of culture is, we're being tasked with transmuting the issues of identity, the fallacy of identity, because every identity construct is a trap, is a cage that comes along with limitations as well as its own stories. An example that I write about in one of my books is when I went to Argentina, I was staying on a cattle farm, and every time I was offered meat for dinner, I would say, no, thank you, I'm a vegan. And I was watching myself becoming more contracted and more trapped in this identity construct, when the reality is there's no such thing as a vegan. Anthropologists are not going to dig up my body in 1,000 years and say, oh, look, we found a vegan. It's going to be a woman or a man. A woman or a man, may prefer to eat a plant-based diet or not, but these are actions and preferences. And by way of linguistic traps, a lot of us have confused habits, preferences, and behaviors with identity constructs and are therefore limiting ourselves. So when we start to unpack the language of identity, we can take responsibility for where we are putting ourselves in cages, and then we can unlock that cage by simply choosing language that describes predilections, tendencies, preferences, and behaviors without conflating those with who we are as people.
Beautiful. Yes, well said. Also, you mentioned conflict and violence, and that's what I had in my notes here. I couldn't get all of it. So, can you talk a little about that module? And because we see, well, the 20th century has been the most violent century in history, to my knowledge, through democide, which is death by government, which is funded or fueled through government students and taxation and these types of things. So, we're looking for solutions now, and we're looking for consent, righteousness, voluntary relationships. But for the course, the conflict violence course, I can't remember if that was the name of the module, but could you talk about that module?
Absolutely. It's pointing our attention to the languaging habits that are programming our reality with more violence. So I know that you have dinner plans after our podcast, David. So you go to meet your friend for dinner and she says, how was the podcast? And you say, we killed it. So in our current culture, that has been inverted to mean something good, but you are programming your reality with murder and also normalizing murder as something positive. And this is just one example. There's so many that are littering our current lexicon. So it's bringing awareness to this. You know, even I think breakfast is the best meal of the day. Well, I would argue that lunch is the most important meal of the day. Why does it have to be an argument? We just have a different opinion about something. But the fact that, the word argue is used so loosely and casually throughout the day to mean we have a different opinion, or we have, a theory about something, that's also programming our reality with more conflict and more violence.
Great point again. Even in the beginning, I can't remember if we were recording or not, but talking about something that's like mind blowing, it is a concept of like your mind is being hurt here. Just here, one sec here. So the also the concept of like stand-up comedy. I started doing stand-up comedy the last year, and very exciting art form with language. It's so fascinating, right? So again, you go up and you do a set, and he's like, "Oh, I bombed," or "I killed it." And so now it's like, okay, being a conscious, man, I'm trying, how can I say, oh, that was an amazing, that was remarkable, trying to find other ways to use the language in a way that is not anti-human or anti-life, and you see it all around us. So these are very exciting modules. I'm sure the audience is very intrigued, and I know I am as well, just because language, you can hear we're communicating through language. This is essential skills and technology that everybody should learn, I think, or excuse me, it would be wise for everybody to learn these types of skills, right? I'm getting rid of the word should. You don't have to do anything. You shouldn't do anything. You get to, I choose to, and this really is the new abilities and skills that I'm learning, because I'm working with young people and adults as well, and we're all in this same kind of 100 years of culture, of weaponization of the culture and the media. Dani and I did a show with Rene Perez, John, about a movie director, and I got to spend some time with him recently again. He did a presentation on how movies program the men to be weak men. And the next one will be about, women being promiscuous and all the things that the feminist movement had brought upon us. But anyways, point is that the news is the new opera for people, right? And so it's like, did you hear what's going on? And so they give us the news characters, and we get a bond, with these people, and we feel like we know them, and it's all through language. And he listed a very powerful phrase in this presentation. He said the script writer is God. I said, oh my gosh, I'm still processing that. In terms of a movie, the filmmaker, the scriptwriter is the one that just lays out the entire thing. So for people out there, if you want to be powerful, I'm not going to say a god, but godlike, you can learn the power of language and writing. And just like Dani has created a great life writing and creating these types of things, you can do the same thing as well. In fact, we need you to. The world is requiring young people and all people to get involved with language and learn these skills, learn these secrets that Dani has accumulated over decades of a professional career, so that you can go out and demonstrate them and create a great life for yourself as well, and create art. We'll talk about art in future shows, but that's how it is. These people that John mentioned, Shakespeare, that's literature. He wasn't writing a history book. That was art. And, back in the day when people read books, that's shaped culture. And now we've shifted to TV shows and movies. And so this is kind of the new way to shape culture, music and comedy, these types of things. So just in wrapping up here, we'll tap back to you, Dani, one more time. But then, John, this institute's been going around for 11 years. Congratulations. I can feel your passion and commitment to the work. So thank you for what you're doing. What would you like to share with the audience just about whether this course or your institute? Just kind of, feel free to, plug yourself and what you got going on. This course is obviously amazing, and Dani's awesome as well. So, but for yourself, what would you like to share with the audience in closing? And then we'll let Dani kind of close it out.
Yes, thank you very much, David, for that. And before I answer your question, you mentioned Mr. Joseph Campbell, and I never pass up an excuse or an opportunity to mention that he went to school, high school, about 1 mile away from here at Canterbury, here in New Milford.
Cool.
And maybe something of the New Milford air inspired him as a teenager to go down the route he did. But anyhow, to your question, and I think appropriate to our conversation here on Education Options TV, everything you see and every action you see on this earth from caveman days till now, look, I'm looking at a microphone, I'm looking at a computer screen, I'm looking at a King Kong glue advertisement, a fake sandwich up there, whatever. That's my legacy from Arby's. That was a display sandwich years ago. Anyway, everything we see, every battle, every book started as an idea in someone's mind. Every building you see, every baby you see, and every grown-up baby like us here started as an idea. And that idea was eventually instantiated in actions. And the ability to formulate that idea and to verbalize that idea is very powerful. And indeed, you alluded to the past century. And it's not for nothing that a certain wavelength of humanity, if so it be, figured out how to crack language and how to manipulate language. And are we still recording?
It looks
Are we still recording, sir?
Awesome. I got kicked
okay.
out. Keep going, sir. Thank you.
A certain group of criminals this past century truly learned how to harness and weaponize, to use your word, language. And if we wish to shove back against these creeps in our own lives and as a society, we need to understand the multi-levels of language and how things are put before us that we would never agree to. I'm not going to hijack this show. You have the sacred hour of dinner coming up, and so do I, and so does Dani. But look at the word public schools. If you knew, and if I knew, and maybe someday we'll have a show on this, what the word public means within the context of the legal system, which puts that up, it would completely change. It changed my life to realize what that word actually means within the voice vocabulary of people using it. And it completely flips the script. Anyway, just a teaser there. The point is, to Dani's course, and before I finally finish this response, language is very important. And the sooner we can learn how to use it in its multi-faceted way, the better and the stronger and the healthier and the holier we'll be. Now, briefly, people can find out about Apocatastasis from our website, which I spend most of my waking hours outside of the classroom updating and finessing and so forth. And they can find out all about our different courses, our different staff members, the different opportunities. You don't have to be enrolled in things to be part of our learning community. We have open events, we have individual seminars, and there's all sorts of things there, including counseling for homeschooling parents, specifically, basically teaching you to teach your child, and especially some of these more sophisticated disciplines once you get up into some of these mathematics or historical or literary courses in high school. So we have a whole smorgasbord there, but Dani's class is a good place to begin.
Thank you, John. Yes, thank you for your work and dedication. This is what's going to take. It's intergenerational in my research. It's going to take time. It's going to take decades. These, unfriendly people have been planning it for years, and it's just mind-blowing. My hometown has 3,000 people in it. So I'm like, man, people think like this. So now it's time for the righteous, the moral, the honorable people, as we're doing now, to create the solutions that we want to see in the world. And this is one of the course. So let's give it up for Dani for the final word here. Dani, you have a 12-week course coming up called Quantum Language. Amazing things, as we just discussed in the show, and we just scratched the surface. What would you like to share with audience members who are thinking about it? And you can feel free to share the pricing. I don't know anything about these things, but share how they can get involved, where to go, and any last words of encouragement for people who want to become quantum language champions.
Yes, I love that. So the course is $50 per week for 12 weeks. Folks can register at ApocatastasisInstitute's website. I recommend it for high schoolers, for college age learners, for parents especially, and for adults continuing their education. I've gone the distance to make this course super fun. There are animations, there are illustrations, there's lots of experiential exercises, so that we understand this not just on an intellectual level, but really get to integrate it within our own bodies. And I really do feel like mastering language is a superhero tool. I met you, David, after I spoke at an event. You were not on stage, and yet the way that you use language had a powerful effect on me. And I knew that I wanted to know more about you and collaborate with you. And that was all because of how you are using language. So people to be leaders, to be empowered to change this world, they don't need podcasts. They don't need big audiences. It's simply understanding how language is coded and how to use language consciously, positively, to uplift, to inspire, to unify, and to transform. And that's what everyone will learn in my course.
Well said. Beautiful course. I want to thank Dani Katz and John Coleman for joining me here on Education Options TV, because I'm not trying to change the system. I'm trying to make new models to make the system obsolete. John believes we can reform it, the restoration. I respect that. I respect everybody who's getting in the game, because one of the most powerful words is action. And hey, we can learn all the things, but until we take action, we're not going to change the world. And many hands make light work, and that's what it's going to take. We're all part of the human family. And this course is one option, and there's many different options out there, but this thing is starting this week. I invite you to consider joining it with Dani, with John's support. There's a community there, and you can get involved and become somebody who is a master of your language and do all the things that language requires. As we just said, it's everything. So thanks for joining me here on Education Options TV, empowering parents with respectful models of learning. We'll see you all on the next show. Bye, everybody.